On the morning of the third day, the old man sat on a concrete step outside his own gate at 7:22 a.m. and watched his son's car pass without slowing. The vehicle, a silver Mercedes-AMG that the old man himself had purchased for his son's 40th birthday 4 years ago, moved through the early traffic on Casely-Hayford Road in the cantonments district of Accra without its brake lights flickering once. His son had his phone pressed to his ear and his eyes fixed forward, on the road and on whatever voice was coming through the speaker. He was not looking at the gate. He was not looking at the man sitting beside the wrought iron fence in a gray polyester shirt, a torn plastic bag between his knees, his father's old walking stick leaning against his shoulder. The car rounded the corner and disappeared past the roundabout. The old man watched it go. Then he looked down at his hands, at the dry skin on his knuckles, at the cracked edges of fingernails he had not cleaned in 3 days, at the calluses that had never fully left. No matter how many decades had passed since he had built anything with them himself, he had been sitting outside his own house for 3 mornings. Nobody had come to ask if he was all right. Nobody had brought him water. But one person had brought him food, and what she had told him while he ate it was going to change the rest of his life. Chief Kwadwo Mensah was 71 years old, 168 centimeters tall, and 74 kilograms, 8 fewer than he had weighed the year his wife Constance died. He had begun his first company in 1978 with a borrowed Jeep Chase 400 and a second-hand market stall at Makola. By 1991, he had offices in 3 countries. By 2004, his construction and logistics group employed over 1,400 people across Ghana and Côte d'Ivoire. He was the kind of man whose name appeared on hospital wings and school rooftops, and whom younger businessmen in Accra walked carefully around in rooms. He had built what he had built across 47 years through one practice that never changed. He watched first and spoke second. His late wife Constance had a name for this. She called it his expensive radar, the ability to sit with a person for 20 minutes and know whether they were the kind of person who would tell him the truth when it cost them something. She had watched him use it to hire the right people, to identify which partnerships would hold, to understand which of his children's friends deserved to be inside his house. She had also watched him, twice in their marriage, refuse to use it when it mattered most. She had pointed this out both times. He had not disagreed. Constance died of a stroke 6 years ago on a Thursday morning in March. Kwadwo was in a board meeting he still had not forgiven himself for attending. He had come home to a house that held the shape of her without the substance. He had sold her reading chair within a week because he could not look at it. He had kept her Bible on the nightstand and had not moved it since. The object he held in his hands now, the dark brown hardwood walking stick, worn smooth at the grip from years of carrying, had belonged to his father. His father had brought it from Kumasi to Accra and used it every day of his final decade. Kwadwo had never needed a walking stick, but he had carried it everywhere anyway, for the weight of it, for the way it settled in his palm, for the specific feeling, when everything else felt uncertain, of holding something his father had also held. He was sitting outside his own house wearing the dead gardener's shirt because of a conversation he had overheard 2 weeks ago. It was 11:19 p.m. He had come down the hallway to get a glass of water. The study door was not fully closed. His son Dexter was inside with his wife blessing of the bright smiles, the well-placed phone calls, the laugh that appeared exactly when it was most convenient. Their voices were low, but the house was quiet, the kind of quiet that carries sound further than people expect. What he heard in the next 4 minutes he had not put down since. They were discussing the estate, the restructuring of company shares, a financial advisor named Mr. Poku who was coming on Friday, a conversation Dexter had scheduled with the family lawyer, a meeting to which Kwadwo had not been invited. Blessing asked, in a tone that was almost administrative, about what she called the fastest and cleanest way forward as it concerned the cantonment's property, specifically, and whether it could be placed into a holding company before the estate was formally assessed. Kwadwo stood in that hallway for 6 minutes without moving. Then he went to the kitchen, drank the water, washed the glass, put it back on the shelf. He went to his bedroom and sat on Constance's side of the bed with his father's stick across his knees. He made a decision. Dexter Mensah was 44 years old and had the handshake of a man who had practiced it. He had inherited from his father the quality of stillness, but where Kwadwo's stillness came from patience, Dexter's had come over the years to feel more like calculation. There was a pause before every answer that had once seemed like thoughtfulness. Blessing Owusu-Mensah was 40, held a law degree from the University of Ghana that she had never practiced, and offered this fact at dinner parties as evidence of the sacrifices she had made for the family. She ran the household with the efficiency of someone who believed that managing a household was a form of owning one. She had replaced 3 members of the domestic staff in the past 2 years, the cook, one of the drivers, the head gardener, for reasons that were each individually plausible and collectively to a pattern. The one person who had not been replaced was Adieze Ndukwe. She was 31, had been the housekeeper for 4 years, and she cleaned the house with the focus of someone for whom the quality of the work was its own private matter. She was from Enugu originally, barely 155 centimeters tall, and wore her hair wrapped in a plain brown cloth. She smelled faintly of camphor and palm oil soap. She had never come to work late. She had never taken from the house a single thing that was not hers. On a Wednesday morning, Kwadwo walked out through the back gate of his own compound, rounded the block on foot, and sat down on the front step in the dead gardener's gray shirt, with the old sandals and the walking stick and the torn plastic bag. He told no one. He called no one. He sat down and he waited to see what the world looked like when he was nothing. On the first day, the security guard Fifi came to open the gate for a delivery truck at 9:47 a.m. He looked at the old man on the step the way people look at someone they have already decided not to see. He opened the gate, directed the truck in, closed it. He did not bring water. He did not ask. Kwadwo ate a meat pie he had bought that morning from a woman at the end of the road for 7 cedis. He sat in the morning heat until the shadows of the compound wall reached his feet. At 2:15 p.m., Blessing came out of the front door with her handbag and her phone already at her ear. She walked down the driveway, past the gate, past the old man sitting beside it, and got into the Land Cruiser and left. Not deliberately. He could tell the difference between deliberate and oblivious. He simply did not exist in the part of the world her eyes had ever lived in. On the second day, it rained from 7 a.m. until nearly noon. Kwadwo sat under the narrow overhang of the compound wall with the plastic bag on his lap and water running off the roof edge 6 inches from his left shoulder, his shirt soaked through at the shoulders, his sandals filled. The smell of the wet road rose from the asphalt, red laterite dust and rain, and something sweet from a mango tree 2 compounds south. He thought about Constance. He thought about the way she used to fill a room, not loudly, not by talking, but simply by being in it. She had chosen the black wrought iron gate because, she said, black iron is honest. It doesn't try to look like anything other than what it is. He sat in that rain for 4.5 hours. At 10:14 a.m., the front door of the compound opened. It was not Dexter. It was Adieze, in a yellow plastic raincoat, carrying a small tray covered with a cloth. She walked down the driveway to the gate and stopped on the other side of the bars. She looked at the old man sitting in the rain without any expression of pity. She simply looked at him the way one person looks at another. "Are you hungry?" she asked. He had not spoken to anyone in 31 hours. "Yes," he said. She reached the tray through the bars. Under the cloth, a dish of jollof rice with a boiled egg, and a small Fanta still cold from the refrigerator, which meant she had moved quickly. She did not say anything else. She went back inside. She did not look over her shoulder. He ate every grain. On the afternoon of the second day, at 3:58 p.m., Dexter came to the gate. He was leaving for the gym, his bag slung over one shoulder, car keys in hand. He stopped and looked at the figure sitting beside the fence and reached into his pocket and produced a folded 20 cedi note. He held it through the bars. "Here," he said, "go and eat something." Kwadwo looked at his son's hand. He looked at the note. He reached up and took it. "Thank you," he said in a voice roughened by days of disuse and rain. Dexter nodded. He got into the car and drove out, and the gate closed automatically behind him. For 15 minutes, Kwadwo sat with the 20 cedi note in his palm. He told himself it meant something. He told himself it was evidence of something worth saving in his son. He wanted it to mean that. Then at 5:17 p.m., Blessing's voice came through the open kitchen window above the gate. She was on her phone. She was talking to Mr. Poku. She was asking about timelines, about board structure in the event of certain changes, about whether the cantonment's property transfer could be completed before the year ended. She was not asking out of anxiety. She was not asking the way a person asks when they are afraid of the answer. She was asking the way someone asks who already knows what they want and is simply confirming the steps. Kwadwo held the 20 cedi note until it was soft from the warmth of his hand. He folded it and put it in his pocket. He picked up his father's walking stick and leaned back against the compound wall and waited for morning. If this story is already sitting heavy in you, stay with me, because what happens on the morning of the third day is the thing that changes the direction of everything. She came at 6:47 a.m. He had been awake since 4:15. The sky over cantonments was still the deep gray of very early morning, and the street was quiet except for the call to prayer from a mosque 2 blocks south and the distant groan of a water truck making its rounds. He heard the front door open before he saw it. Then Adaze appeared on the driveway, not in the yellow raincoat this time, but in her plain blue dress and the brown head wrap, carrying a covered plate and a metal cup of tea. She did not come to the bars. She opened the pedestrian latch and came out onto the step and sat down beside him, not standing over him, beside him. She set the plate down and lifted the cloth. Rice porridge with evaporated milk and sugar. The tea was ginger, from the smell of it, and it was hot. "You've been here 3 mornings," she said. "Yes," he said. "Do you have people?" she asked. He looked at the gate, at the black wrought iron. "I did," he said. "I'm not sure anymore." Daisy looked at her hands folded in her lap. "My father used to say," she said quietly, "that the only people who are truly yours are the ones who would sit with you when you have nothing to offer." He asked where her father was from. "Enugu. He died when I was 3. She paused. "His name was Tobena Ndukwe." The ginger tea was halfway to Quadwo's mouth. He lowered it back down. Tobena Ndukwe. He had not heard that name spoken aloud in 32 years. Tobena Ndukwe had been his first business partner. They had begun together in 1978. 2 young men from Kumasi with Jeet 400 borrowed between them, and enough stubbornness to misread as confidence. Tobena had a mathematical mind that could hold 100 figures simultaneously and sort them without writing a single thing down. He also had a chest infection nobody had taken seriously until it was too late, and he died in 1992 at the age of 34 in a hospital in Enugu, leaving behind a wife who died of grief 2 years later and a daughter who had been 3 years old and placed in the care of an aunt in Enugu. Quadwo had paid for the funeral. He had traced the daughter through a church network, Adaze, 3 years old, and for the following 20 years had paid anonymously for her education through a trust account administered by St. Matthew's Parish in Enugu. He had never met her. He had not known she was standing in front of him. He had not known she had been inside his house for 4 years. He set the cup of tea down on the step. He pressed both hands flat against his knees to keep them from shaking. He looked at the gate, at the black iron Constance had chosen because, she said, it doesn't try to look like anything other than what it is. He understood what the last 3 days had been for. He had not gone out to test whether his son would recognize him. He had gone out to find out what the world looked like when he had nothing. And what he had found, sitting on a concrete step he owned but could not enter, was not what he had gone looking for. He had gone looking for his son. He had found Tobena's daughter. From 2 compounds down, Mama Grace Owusu appeared on her morning walk. She was 79, a retired schoolteacher who had known Quadwo since 1989, and who had, for 3 mornings, watched the arrangement from across the road with the patience of someone who understood exactly what was happening. She stopped now on the pavement. She looked at Adaze. She looked at Quadwo. She looked at the walking stick resting against his knee. She did not say anything. She simply nodded, slowly, the way a person nods when they have been waiting for something to arrive and now it has. Then she continued on her walk. At 8:03 a.m., on the morning of the 3rd day, Chief Quadwo Mensah stood up from the concrete step. He picked up his father's walking stick. He folded the torn plastic bag and tucked it under his arm. He walked through the pedestrian latch of his own gate, up his own driveway, and through the front door of his own house. He walked to the kitchen. Blessing was at the island with her laptop and a cup of coffee. She looked up. The color left her face immediately. She set the coffee cup down too hard on the marble. She looked at the gray shirt. She looked at the sandals. She looked at the walking stick. Her mouth opened and closed twice without a sound. Quadwo walked to the kitchen sink. He turned on the tap. He washed his hands with the same deliberateness with which he had washed a water glass in the dark hallway 2 weeks ago. He dried his hands on the kitchen towel hanging from the oven handle and hung it back in its place. Then he sat down at the kitchen table. Dexter appeared in the doorway 12 minutes later, still in gym clothes from the previous afternoon. He stood in the frame and looked at his father and did not come inside. "Papa," he said. "Sit down, Dexter," Quadwo said. Dexter sat down. For 22 minutes, Quadwo spoke in plain language. He did not shout. He did not perform grief. He described what he had heard through the study door on a Tuesday night 2 weeks ago, and he described what he had seen over 3 mornings sitting outside the gate he had built. And he described what those 2 sets of observations, placed beside each other, meant. He said it the way he said most things, quietly, with precision, without anything to prove. Dexter said nothing. Blessing said twice that he had misunderstood the conversations. He waited for her to finish and continued. The share restructuring and the property transfer you have been discussing with Mr. Poku, Quadwo said, will not be proceeding. He placed his hand flat on the table. I will meet with Emmanuel Ademi Bright on Friday. Emmanuel Ademi Bright was the senior partner at the law firm that had managed Quadwo's affairs for 19 years. His name appeared on very few documents and mattered on every one of them. The estate will be reorganized. The appointment is already scheduled. Blessing's grip tightened on the edge of the counter. This house, Quadwo said, will remain in trust under my name, administered by a board of 3 until I determine otherwise. He stood. I want you to have time to make arrangements. He went to his bedroom. He put on his white caftan. He put on the leather slippers Constance had bought him from a cobbler on Osu Oxford Street 11 years ago, worn soft at the heel now. He picked up his father's walking stick and stood at the window, looking at the bougainvillea at the front wall. Constance had chosen the bougainvillea. It was in full bloom, which it did every February regardless of what was happening inside the house behind it. He went back out to the gate. Adès was still there, collecting the cup and plate from the step. She looked up at him. She looked at the white caftan and the leather slippers in the absence of the gray shirt. Her expression passed through several stages of understanding in rapid succession. Your father's name was Benendukwe, Quadwo said. He was my first business partner, the most honest man I ever worked beside. He died in 1992 and left behind a daughter he never had the chance to raise. Adès went completely still. I paid for your education through a trust account administered by St. Matthew's Parish in Enugu. For 20 years. I never met you. I did not know you were here. She said nothing for a long moment. Then, very quietly, the account from St. Matthew's. Yes, he said. She sat down on the concrete step. Not because she was weak. She sat down the way a person sits when the ground has shifted under them and they need a moment to find out where it has settled. He sat down beside her. They sat there together on the step outside the black wrought iron gate on Casely, Hayford Road in the cantonments district of Accra in the February morning, while the bougainvillea bloomed above them, and the street went about its business, not knowing what had just happened and not needing to. Quadwo did not cry until he was back in his bedroom, alone, sitting on Constance's side of the bed with his father's walking stick across his knees. Not from grief, from something closer to relief, from the specific feeling of discovering, at 71, that the world still contained one thing he had not built and could not buy, and that it had been there the whole time, right inside his own front gate, going about its work. Dexter thought he was managing the future. He had drawn up timelines, consulted advisors, had conversations in rooms he believed were private, and he had looked at his father, an old man in a white caftan who ate alone and went to bed early and walked with a stick, and he had calculated. He had calculated the estate. He had not calculated the man. What Chief Quadwo Mensah carried inside him, after 47 years of watching first and speaking second, was not something that could be transferred to a holding company or dissolved in a lawyer's office. It was a practice, a muscle, the ability to sit with a person in any condition, in a boardroom, on a concrete step, in the rain, and know whether they were the kind of person who would tell you the truth when it cost them something. On Friday, the meeting with Emmanuel Ademi Bright ran for 3 hours and 40 minutes. The estate was reorganized. The holding company proposal was dissolved entirely. A new trust was established with provisions that Quadwo had drafted himself in a quiet hour in handwriting Constance would have recognized. Among its provisions was a formal salaried position, full-time, with benefits and a housing allowance, for a household and property manager to be named by the chief personally. He named Adès Ndukwe, and on the Monday morning after the papers were signed, she arrived at the house on Casely Hayford Road, at the same time she had always arrived, hung her bag on the same hook by the kitchen door, filled the same kettle, and began. Except now she knew the name of the man whose house she had been cleaning for 4 years, and now he knew the name of the girl his friend had left behind. and outside the bougainvillea was in full bloom, which it would be for another 6 weeks at least, indifferent and faithful, and perfectly itself. Here is the truth this story carries, and it has nothing to do with billionaires or disguises or gates made of black iron in Accra. The people who see you when you appear to have nothing are rare. Not because goodness is rare. They are rare because most of us spend so much of our lives surrounded by people who only see what we can offer them that we begin to mistake that arrangement for normal. We begin to forget that there is another kind of person, quieter, less visible, going about their work without announcement or reward, who sees every person at every gate because it has never occurred to them not to. You cannot buy that. You cannot inherit it. It is carried in the hands of a person who was taught, somewhere by someone, that the human being in front of you is the whole story, not what they are wearing, not what they can offer, not what is written beside their name in a document, just the person, just the human being at the gate. Quadwo went looking for proof that his son was still who he believed him to be. He did not find that, but he found something he had not known he was looking for. A girl who was 3 years old when her father died, and who had grown into a woman who brought jollof rice through a gate to a stranger in the rain, without being asked, without knowing who he was, without needing to know. The ones the world walks past are often the ones holding everything together, and the people who think they are handing others an ending are often, without knowing it, handing them a key. Now, before you go, if you were sitting on that concrete step, if everything you had built was on the other side of a gate, and the people you had trusted with it were deciding your future without you, and one person came out in the rain and sat beside you, with food, what would that moment mean to you? Not what you would say afterward, not what you would think. What would it mean in the body, to have someone see you when you were nothing? Leave your answer in the comments. I read everyone, and if this story found you the way I think it did, subscribe, because every week on this channel we tell the story of someone the world walked past. Someone quiet, someone hidden in plain sight, carrying something the world desperately needed, but had not yet learned to recognize. I'll see you in the next one.